Welcome, Matt, from Under the Hammer. Really appreciate you joining us here on our podcast. Now, tell our viewers a bit about you. Who is Matt Shalhoub and what is your business?
Okay, so I've got a business called Under the Hammer. Under the Hammer has been around since 2007, and we primarily focus on real estate auctioneering, certified training, and coaching and skills development. Prior to this, though, I was working actively in the real estate industry. So I got in as an agent in 1994, so just bordering 30 years ago. And since that time, I've worked in property management, sales, been a sales manager. I had my own business that I built and sold, and to make way for what we do now. So the auction business started originally as a view to be a part-time gig, just a way to earn a bit of extra money, and it very quickly evolved into something that became a full-time business. At our peak, we conducted 4,000 auctions in 1 year, which was a significant number. And it was that point that realised probably needed a bit of diversification. So we started venturing into the training arm a little bit more, so helping people with CPDs, assistant agent or certificate registration, as it was known back then, licensing, etc. And so I was working as part of another organisation in the training arm, and I bought them out in 2015. Amazing. So since then, what we found is that our business, the success of our business has come from the trilogy, which is auctioneering, coaching, and certified training. And since then, we've expanded outside of New South Wales into the ACT, which is our second biggest market, Queensland, Victoria, and recently Tasmania.
Coming back to the auctioneer side of your business, what has been the evolution of auctions?
Auctions have changed a lot, and it's one of those things that when you've been around it for a long time, you ask anyone who's been around either real estate or auctioneering for a significant amount of time, they'll see that the changes have been somewhat subtle over a period of time. If you look back, say 30 years ago, and you did a direct comparison today, it'd be chalk and cheese. But if you look at it gradually, there's small changes. And I think one of the biggest changes that I've noted is people's awareness of how they operate. It's no longer a taboo, where once upon a time, auctions was a scary word for a lot of people, where now it's like the norm. If you look at a state like, say, Victoria, or a city like Melbourne, they've always led the charge in the volume of auctions. That's just the way it's been instilled in their culture. And I remember when I was first working in real estate, it was labelled what was an auction property, what's not an auction property. Where now as a process, there's a lot of advantages, obviously, to both parties around the process. But, as a process, it's been probably more commonly accepted. People aren't scared by it as much anymore. And, I think when you look at a market as dynamic as Sydney, and you see, even in our ups and downs, we're still fairly dynamic. I think that, from a seller's perspective, they see a lot of advantages. But I think as a process, people look at it now and go, well, it's far more transparent. There's no doubt about that. And you've got your opportunities around that. And it's taken that fear factor away. The other thing it's noted is people like yourselves, professional buyer advocates coming in, and we're seeing more and more people like you guys at our auctions. And that's also giving it a different dynamic now as well, because it's somewhat, professional dealing to professional as opposed to professional dealing to the consumer.
Do you think as well that the auction environment or the auction process is largely adopted due to accelerates the time frame between properties coming to market and being sold?
It can. Traditionally, the days on market are shorter for an auction program, traditionally. But, what we've got to remember when we're dealing with property, we're also dealing with people behind the property. And, people's situations, their motivations, their emotions can often have an impact and a bearing on the outcome. I think what it does do, though, it channels people quicker to probably where they always were going to be, but they do it in a probably more accelerated time frame, if that makes sense.
In current market conditions, how are you finding auctions right now?
Quite often the first question we get asked is how are clearance rates? And I don't necessarily believe that's a true indication of the auction market, because there's other factors that can affect the clearance rate. If you've got buyer activity and those buyers are willing to participate and they part with their money by way of a bid, and for whatever reason the vendor has a shift in motivation, that property will go onto the statistics that didn't sell at auction. But to me, that's not indicative of what the market's doing. It's just the vendor's choice that they opted not to take that offer. So, there's very, very few properties that we see at the moment that don't have any buyer activity. I would say in the current conditions and the current climate, the start of 2024, we definitely saw more stock on the market. So buyers have a little bit more choice. So the buyer pool's been diluted a little bit. So while you might not have as many people per property, the reality is you only sell it to one, right?
Yeah.
So, and if you look at the statistics and what's actually selling, you'll find, and you guys would see it yourself in what you do, properties are still being sold. Now, you might see more sell prior to auction. You might sell, a different number sell straight after auction, but it's all part of the process. So, I definitely feel that the landscape might have changed a little bit in terms of the intensity, but, the willing purchasers are still there. And, when we see we've got a great property, that's well sought after, and we've got a vendor that's highly motivated, and you've got large numbers of participation there, I mean, those results are still exceeding expectations.
Absolutely. I'm curious, and to get your feedback or thoughts on this, what makes a good auctioneer strong on the auction day?
What makes a good auctioneer?
Yeah.
Ask every auctioneer, they'll probably tell you.
Yeah.
Look, I think that in Sydney we have a wonderful selection
Right.
of highly accomplished and professional auctioneers, and I say that sincerely. I believe because our culture is that predominantly agents will use an external one to their business, where in other states it's culture that the internal person will do the auction. I think as an auctioneer, you've got to remember we're only an instrument that the agents will use. And, I think you can take the most accomplished auctioneer and put them in an environment where they're unfamiliar with that agent that they're working with, and that lack of synergy can really have an impact on the results. So I think, look, experience speaks for itself, and you can't teach experience, you've got to earn it. But I think your ability to have a great synergy with the person you're working with in terms of the real estate agent has a big part of how well you perform. And I think, like anything, the more you do, the more confidence you get. And, if you look at, say, an inexperienced auctioneer, and we all started there, everyone did their first auction at some point, quite often they'll second guess themselves. Where an experienced agent will back themselves, an experienced auctioneer will back themselves a little bit more because they know their instincts are correct.
And what advice would you have for buyers or those looking to watch and witness an auction and potentially go and bid at auction? What advice do you have for them in terms of preparation?
Look, the question is, if you're a buyer and you're looking to make the biggest purchase that you're going to make, you're not buying a retail item. You go to the store, you buy a pair of jeans, you don't like it, you can throw it away, leave it in the back of the cupboard. But you're buying a home. And for most people, it's going to be the largest purchase that they're probably going to make or have made and probably going to make for a long time. So, preparation is key. How you do prepare, it's going to be different for everybody. One thing that I sincerely believe, and I actually use this in my auction dialogue when working with buyers, is that, buyers can very easily talk themselves out of something that they might regret later on. And, when we're talking about purchases, normally in a 7-digit category, whether it's 1 million, 2 million, 3 million, whatever it might be, when you look at the hard lines that people put on themselves, they might put a hard budget or a hard line where they're not going to go past. Quite often they may get up the next day and say, well, maybe I should have had one more go at it, or I probably could make that work financially. Yeah. But psychologically, they had said it's not going to work for them.
Yeah.
So, I think that if you're trying to achieve the bargain purchase, I think you're going to be looking for a long time. And if you look at the history books in real estate, one thing we know is that unless you're a speculator and you're planning on flipping it in 6 months, but over the medium to long term, no one really has lost money in the Sydney real estate market. And, so many people say, I could have bought that. We've all heard the stories, right? I could have bought that 5 years ago, would have only paid this. Well, this is a mistake that buyers make. Yeah. You then become one of those people who says, I could have bought that if I'd gone just to that. But as long as it's within your reach financially, I mean, there's always going to be a limitation. The second thing I'll probably suggest is, contrary to probably your question, is probably not to try and over-educate yourself too much.
Okay.
And I think human nature is that we try to overly educate. We try to understand every integral little part of what we're going to go there for. At the end of the day, you're going to an auction because you want to buy a home. And you've chosen that home for God knows whatever reason that may be, that's the one you want to buy. That's where you want to be with your family and so forth. So if you can make that work, make it work.
Yeah.
So if you overeducate yourself so much and say, well, that one around the corner only sold for X, but that had 1 square metre smaller and that one needed a coat of paint, whatever have you, you're going to be forever looking for a property. And I think that is, again, look at big picture.
Yeah.
And that's the key. Look at the amount of wealth that's been created in the real estate markets over the years. And I think the key is if you can make it work, it fits the boxes. Engage professionals. I think that's a really important part. Takes the emotional side out of it a little bit, but don't overeducate yourself.
Do you think there is a difference between results in on-site versus in-house auctions?
It's a difficult question to answer because, when I started my real estate career, we didn't do on-site auctions.
Right.
Everything was in rooms.
Wow.
Saturdays were for open homes, and I'm personally a big fan of in-room auctions. I think they offer a different dynamic. And if you asked 10 agents, 5 that were pro in rooms and 5 that were pro on sites, they'd all give you their arguments as to what they feel is better. From an auctioneer's perspective, again, I do find that the in rooms are quite effective, especially from a control angle. The ability to almost have like a classroom environment, but you've also got the leverage of other properties going there. And some would argue the counter that what if they don't sell? But personally, I think that what it comes down to, and we saw this in COVID, that if you've got buyers on a property, they're going to come no matter where you have the auction, when you have it. So when the second lockdown that we had, if you remember, we got told on Friday morning that we're going to lockdown the next day. And so on Friday, we had to change our Saturday rosters that we started auctions at midday on Friday, and we ran them through to about 9 o'clock Friday night. And people showed up because they needed to show up. So I definitely feel that, buyers will show up no matter where. I think that the key to that question is also down to the agent. If you're a high volume operator and you're running multiple auctions every week, you're probably going to be more advantageous for your time to look at an in-room scenario because your Saturday is going to be for your open houses. But again, it's very much a personal choice. And I really feel that, I don't know if it has a bearing on the outcome. It's more so about the logistics.
Do you think that is the best sales process for property?
Oh, I personally believe it, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I wouldn't be doing what I was doing if I didn't believe it.
No, absolutely.
But I also think that it offers quite a few advantages because, having an auction tag gives the vendors, gives the agents and somewhat the buyers as well, a chance to see what the market's willing to do. Now, if you look at the headline results, the ones that achieve, the media attention is look how much this sold above reserve and all that kind of stuff. I don't think agents and vendors in those scenarios would have ever in their wildest dreams imagined achieving some of these results.
Yeah.
And, that is purely an indication of the market willing to pay for that. On the contrary, sometimes vendors need to go through a process, and that is to understand through social proof, what their homes are actually worth in the current market. Because if we're all selling our own homes, we've all got an emotional attachment to some degree, and we're always looking at the best case scenario. So the auction tag will give you a bit of that social proof to say, well, this is what someone's willing to pay for it. Are you willing to accept it, yay or nay? And that's what we find probably the true essence of what the auction is. It's putting it out to the open market, attracting a wide spectrum of potential purchasers, and identifying who's willing to pay for it and what they're willing to pay for it.
So what would have made a property back in the day not be auction worthy?
Okay, we're going back to the history books now, but look,
I just think it'd be
was
curious.
A stigma.
I'm curious.
Yes, okay. There was a stigma, and it was. I remember back in the day, it was always like, well, if it was something, well, for example, units were taboo for auctions.
Right.
You never would auction a unit, unless it was a mortgagee or something.
Okay.
Where now that's a myth.
Yeah.
We all know that's not true, but there had to be a certain caliber of property, like it'd be a home, it would be something significant, something that was only going to generate a lot of interest. Otherwise, we'd put for sale tag on it and put a price on it, which is not the case now. I mean, I would say that depending on where you are in the Sydney market particularly, I think that, the percentiles of auction tag properties would be significantly quite high, compared to what it used to be.
Amazing. What advice would you have for, and you have answered this about not over preparing, but also being prepared. Is there any additional advice you can give to those in the market at the moment and potentially missing out on auctions or missing out on property, and just some advice around how they can basically go out there and secure a home?
Yeah. Look, the reality is, and this is going to sound very harsh, it doesn't mean to come across this way, you can't outdo someone who has more money to spend than you do. That's just the reality. Okay? So I think that some of the advice would be, to try and capitalise on opportunity in terms of timings. That's number one. Don't always leave it to sort of playing it cool, if you want to put it that way, and not expressing interest, because often you will miss out.
Yeah.
I think there's a misconception out there that buyers can't work with agents. They can't, and you guys would know it from what you do. The
Yeah.
more forthcoming you are with the selling agents, the more you're going to get back in return, right?
100%.
So if I'm looking at a property and I don't want to appear to be too interested because that's going to be bad for my negotiations, I'm most likely going to be discounted as a contender for that property. So I miss out on the communication that's going to allow me to prepare along the way.
Yeah.
And then what happens is you get a notification before it's about to sell. Hey, just let you know we've got this offer. It's about to sell. Can you come forward in the next 24 hours? Well, I'm not ready yet. Of course you're not. You didn't tell me you're interested.
Yeah.
So I think working with the selling agents is very, very important to express your interest. And you guys would know from what you do, the access to the off-market properties, which we're seeing a massive shift in the amount of properties that are being sold off-market now, never actually hitting the open market at all. So I think that's one angle there. In terms of an auction strategy itself, I don't know that there is one. Everyone will give you their thoughts on how to win at auction. But again, if someone wants it just as much as you do, and they're willing to spend or have the ability to spend more money, well, then I don't know if you're going to beat them. So I think it's about creating opportunity for yourself. And, when we create opportunities, and I talk about this a lot in coaching, we're trying to grab something that might not have been there on the surface, where when you go through the motions and you just show up at auction, what you're trying to do is take the opportunity because it's been presented in front of you.
Yeah.
If I create it by, generating interest early, ask the agent the question, is this able to be bought prior to auction? Does it have to go to auction? If it is able to be bought, how much would they be wanting to sell it prior to auction? Little things like that will give you an indication as to whether there's an opportunity for you to secure it early or not. Now, on the flip side, if you're not there, you can't seize an opportunity.
Yeah.
So quite often we see properties where, for whatever reason, buyers might over anticipate what it's going to get. Something else might have come on the market which detracts a few of the buyers. If you're not there in the mix, you've got no chance of securing it.
Yeah.
So, I think you need to be visual, you need to be present, and, you need to be in it to win it, as they say.
Is there a noteworthy auction experience that you can share with our listeners?
Not really.
One moment to shine. Shut down.
There are times when I've gone to auctions where there's only one buyer at the auction. So what would somebody need to do in order to navigate through that?
So what you got to remember is, when there's only one registered party at an auction, that's not an uncommon scenario. And there's a numerous amount of factors that come into that, whether it be people just not being ready for whether it be financial, legal, second guessing, whatever it might be. It doesn't mean there's a lack of interest. It just means at that one point in time, there's only one person who's actually willing to say, I'm willing to buy this right now. Everyone else will be like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I need to wait for this, whatever have you. I don't look at it as an absolute negative. I look at it as a complete opportunity from a buyer's perspective. And I can't even tell you the amount of properties that we've managed to successfully sell under auction conditions with the one buyer. At the end of the day, you've got a person who's willing to purchase, you've got a person who's willing to sell. And the first decision that needs to be made by the buyer is it going to deter me because no one else is here, or am I going to seize the opportunity that I've got less competition to work with today? And, a lot of buyers will misinterpret that and say, well, there's no one else here willing to buy it, so therefore it must be bad, something must be wrong with it. And it's not true. Nothing could be further from the truth. Quite often in those scenarios, we get the correspondence from the agents, hours or a couple of days leading afterwards saying, hey, someone else has raised their head, who we're waiting on has come forward, we've sold it above what we were hoping to actually achieve for it. So I think in that particular scenario, it's really important for buyers and you guys, when you're representing your clients there, to take it as an opportunity, because your vendors are generally going to be more motivated on auction day because they've built up this whole process in their mind as well as to, the whole circumstances leading around the sale. I don't think it's advisable for a buyer to say, well, I'm the only registered party, so I'm going to drop my interest 20%. That's not going to do you any favours. It's not going to help you buy the property because, like a buyer has a limitation, a vendor has a limitation what they're willing to accept. But it definitely is an opportunity that you get the chance to grab a negotiation, grab an agent, grab a vendor, and really, swing the pendulum in terms of the process in your favour, and work with that agent to get the property purchased.
Yeah.
I mean, the old adage that we use is, to a buyer is, why would you want to wait till there's more competition if you've got an opportunity to do it when there's no one else around?
Yeah.
And that's where I think buyers can make a mistake.
Yeah.
They misconceive, well, if there's no one else here, so I won't make an offer. Well, that's when I'd want to make an offer because I'm going to get the best out of negotiation at that point.
And how do you handle the auction floor in that situation?
Look, I work on instructions from the agents, but I'll always give my advice as long as it's welcomed. And my advice always is to approach the buyer, and we'll be transparent because the buyers are going to very quickly work it out. And let them know that for whatever reason, they are the only registered buyer here today. You know, did they want to, under auction conditions, of course, but did they want to do something discreetly and privately, and they're willing to come forward, or they're going to sit back? And if they say, well, if there's no one else here, we're probably going to sit back. We'll go through the motions, we'll open up the auction, pass it aside, and continue post-auction. If they turn and say, no, I'm here to buy it, great. Well, they know where they need to be price-wise. They've been given a guide, and we'll pull them aside, and we'll open up the auction terms, execute a negotiation, and knock it down to them. So we always give them the choice. And I find that buyers can quite often respond favourably to that. That sometimes, you know, again, from what we spoke about, they'll be like, well, if no one else is here, we're probably going to hold back. Cool, it's up to you.
Yeah.
You can't make someone do what they don't want to do.
Absolutely. So any last bit of wisdom you can give to those that are looking to sell and are about to launch their property via an auction campaign? And then on the flip side, buyers out there in the market?
Yeah. I think that, you know, when it comes to either side of the transaction, whether you're buying or selling, I think that the main key is the comfort levels. And, you know, it's a bit of a cliche, but I'm going to say it anyway. Everyone's like, well, you know, the timing is the right timing whenever you're ready. But it is true. You know, if you're ever going to try and, or forever going to try and pick the top, pick the bottom, you're always going to be on that treadmill. You're going to be running, but going nowhere.
Yeah.
That's the reality. You know, it's the first thing we ever got taught in the real estate industry is when people are trading in the same market, it doesn't really matter what happens because it's you know, it's relative.
Yeah.
You buy low, you sell low. You buy high, you sell high. I think that the client comfort level is very important. And, you know, whether it's engaging a buyer's advocate as a professional to take that emotional side out of it, take the due diligence out of it a little bit and sort of give a comfort barrier, that's great. Whether it's a comfort level around the selling agent that you're appointing. And we're very fortunate, you know, one of the things I've noticed change in our industry over the last 3 decades is a level of professionalism in the real estate industry. You know, it's becoming more and more professional every year. And I think that the caliber of agents that people are dealing with is continuing to get higher and higher. And I think that's a real, you know, a real compliment to the industry overall. And legislation has a part of it, without a doubt. You know, the changes to legislation have forced certain behaviours and certain traits. But I also think that if you look at the price of real estate transactions, you know, what people are, what they're actually spending or what they're selling for, and you look at people's general expectations as a consumer and the evolution of people in the, you know, in the business world, if you want to put it that way, I think people demand more straight away. And I think that, you know, people's knowledge around the process has dramatically increased. Their expectations have increased, and it's forced agents to meet those standards if they want to be successful in what they do.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter whether you're selling, you know, the tiniest of studios or whether you're selling the McMansion on the waterfront. I think people still, no matter who they are, for that person, that price point signifies the largest asset that they either own or they're going to own. So their expectations have no doubt lifted.
Could that also just be competition because there's so many agents all swimming in the same pond?
Again, probably has a big part of it as well. You know, we're in a highly competitive industry. Whether you're a buyer's agent, whether you're a selling agent, whether you're an auctioneer, whether you're a trainer, you know, it's a highly competitive industry that has the ability for individuals within there to earn significant amounts of money without having to climb the corporate ladder for years or having to do degree upon degree. So it's a transactional based industry that allows you to have quite a good earning capacity. And I think in order for you to shine, you're going to need to be at the top of your game, or at least match the people in the top of the game. Now, you could ask 20 consumers who they think they're the best professional is in any aspect of the industry, and they'll all give you a different answer based on their own experiences. You know, you ask me, you know, who the best auctioneer is. or you ask any agent who the best auctioneer is, they should say that the auctioneer they use
Yeah.
is the best auctioneer. Because otherwise, why would they want to use someone they don't believe is the best at what they do?
Yeah.
Right? So in this particular case, I think that the industry overall is becoming more professional. And as a result of that, I think the consumers are benefiting from it because there's been a large drive in that. The legislation's been a drive in it. The competition factor's been a drive in it. But the entry and exit points in terms of price point has a lot to do with it also.
Thank you so much for joining us. With
My
our
pleasure. Great to be
podcast.
here.
No, we really appreciate it.
See you soon.